Hey folks, hello internet. I am going to set a series of timers so that I don't use too much of your time. I'm going to use some of your time talking about how I'm going to use timers to not use too much of your time. Hey, I am Josh Boykin. I thank you, PIGSquad, for bringing me in today. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to help people hear about your game, aka getting the most out of your time talking about your stuff, because this isn't necessarily just specific to getting your game out, but uh, how many folks out there have a game that they want people to hear about? Something. Yeah, that's a pretty decent portion of the population. Um, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about who I am. I like that picture. Thank you, Chris Higgins. You took a great picture. I am the founder of Intelligame.us. It's a game culture and criticism site that is dedicated to finding intersections between games and the world around us. So I do a lot of English majory writings about games. I also am the senior editor for GotGame.com, which is a more traditional video game journalism website, news, reviews, editorials, that kind of thing. I've been working for them since 2009, so I've had a little bit of time there. And I also am the organizer for a meetup group here called Twitch PDX. And by here I mean in Portland, because that's what the PDX is for. We are right now in a transition. We do a lot of focus on trying to find ways to connect streamers with their audiences, but are going to be doing some things for video game audiences at large. So you should keep an eye out for that too. So, of course, I am also a lover of video games. I would hope that many people here are. So why listen to me? I don't know. That's not actually true. I just really like the shrug emoji, and I wanted to make sure I had an opportunity to use it in my presentation somewhere. I also call it shrugmoji, which I hope catches on. But realistically, why are we listening to me talk about ways that you can get somebody to listen to your game or to find out about your game? It's because I have people try to get me to listen about their games all the time. One of the ways that people try to do that is via email. Some of you are having a little bit of anxiety just looking at these counts. And just in case this is too small for you to see in a distance, let me go ahead and blow that up for you. This is a screenshot of my a portion of my inbox as of, yes, I know, it's making people nauseous. And I've gotten to the point I'm just like, I can't, and regardless. So this is one of my inboxes for Got Game. And of course, I'm going to highlight these two things here, which everybody is already staring at. This is the number of unread messages that I currently have in my email. And the reason that I bring this up is because if you are blasting emails out and using that as your primary form of communication about how your game gets out, you may be one of 260 or one of 13,965. I was an English major, not a math person. So the question then is, how do you make sure that if you are one of these many, how do you make sure that your information is actually getting to me? Because there are still emails that I do end up picking up on and stories that I follow up on. So brace yourself, Intelligame pro tips are coming. Intelligame's the name of my website. I used this picture once because who doesn't like pro tips? Marketing pro tip number 1, form emails are not your friend. AKA leave these to PR people whose emails are more likely to be opened even if or when they are uninteresting. And don't worry about taking too many detailed notes. If this is something you're interested in, I do have links to the slides at the end. Basically, if you're going to use a form email, the kind of blanket, hey, my name is this, my game is this, it is a roguelike / whatever. By the time I've read that, if I've read 20 other emails that are kind of the same way, it's hard for you to establish an identity for what actually makes your game important. What I would recommend, though I know that this takes a little bit extra time, is if you are working with a PR group, have the PR group go ahead and do the mass blast emails, and then use your time in marketing to send more targeted, direct approaches to people who you think are going to be actual, like, dedicated influencers, that's the word, who are interested in your game. If you're going to send an email, make it brief, and also say when you're going to follow up if you don't hear back from them. This gives you an opportunity to institute a little bit of professionality and say, hey, I'm not just sending this email to 50 different people. I care about you. I care about your response. If I don't hear back from you in a good 5 days, I'm just going to send another email to see if you got the information. Also, whenever possible, if you've got a Steam key, if you've got a build or whatever, just hand it off in the email. There are any number of times where, because we get so many emails, people will say, oh, if you're interested in information, let me know and I'll send you a key. That one extra step can be the one extra step that makes me find another game that I'm paying attention to. This is not to say that your game is not important, because in fact it is, but these are the ways that you make sure that I can find out how important your game is as quickly as possible. While we're talking about marketing, let's talk about a simple question. Anybody familiar with Rami Ismail? Yeah, developer, half of Vlambeer, which is a really big independent game studio. If you're not following Rami on Twitter, I totally recommend it. He does a lot of really relevant conversation about a number of topics, including marketing and just general game stuff. He asked on Twitter just last week, he said, I'm hearing great things about Ubisoft's Steep, but I literally can't find anything describing why I should play it. Who can pitch it? Real simple Twitter question. Now you could do this, which is what was actually tweeted by the professional, like actual verified account for Steep. They said, we offer you the chance to experience and share our mountain world in whatever way you like while having fun with your friends. I mean, that sounds pretty exciting, right? And you can see that there were 3 people who did like this response. You could also do this. Charlie Hall, who's a writer for Polygon, just said, non-violent open world Red Bull ad. Notice that this had 4 retweets and 52 likes. And then Rami chimed in with, have you ever considered PR? To which Charlie replied, is that a trick question? Because he's a journalist. But then Rami did say, I mean, you just sold a copy of Steep. So, pro tip number 2, social media intelligently, because social media is now a verb in addition to a noun. AKA, if it sounds like spam, even if it's not spam, it's spam. That was an opportunity for Ubisoft to be able to reach out and establish some real credibility with their audience. But because it sounded a little too formulaic, it didn't create the resonance that like 5-word tweet did. So when you're doing your social media-ing, my personal recommendations in addition to that would be to be consistent. Make sure that if you are tweeting regularly, that you're providing something for your audience to see. Also use images. My experience is that algorithmically speaking, your posts are more likely to be seen on Facebook and Twitter if they are accompanied with images. Also, mention small and mid-tier influencers so that you can start to establish some baseline connections with people who may give your game a little more site time than Polygon, Kotaku, and the like. And also remember your own personality. Like, this is about us trying to figure out what your game is about, what you are about, what you're interested in. This is your platform to do that. Now, speaking of social media, and we're going to walk into our wrap-up, I want to talk a little bit about Intelligame on social media. As of today, Intelligame has 155 likes on Facebook, and I have 107 followers on my underutilized Twitter account. The reason I bring this up is because these numbers are not astronomical. These are pretty reasonable based on a lot of my personal friends and people, you know, my mother and not my grandmother, she's not on Facebook. That said, I want to talk about some fundraising results we did. Intelligame just ran an Extra Life fundraiser back in November. I had set an initial target of $500. By the end of our 25-hour live stream on November 5th, we raised over $2,000, $2,350, which is not a small amount of money, particularly to be raised by a network that somebody might look at and say, oh, you've only got 150 likes on Facebook? Probably not, doesn't mean a whole lot. My third tip, and this is the one that I take the most seriously, is grow and activate your community. AKA, your people IRL and virtually want to help you be successful. This is also the only AKA that has a second set, which is let them help you be successful. There are people out there who care about you and want to see you succeed. but you have to provide them opportunities to be able to do so. So I wholly recommend telling people what you do on a regular basis. If you have a day job and you code at night, if the coding is what you care about, tell people you're a coder. Starting to tell people that I was a game journalist instead of a healthcare IT consultant was a really big pivot point in my life. Also, find ways for friends to help that also engage their interests. During the live stream that I did for Extra Life, I brought in some folks who really loved Destiny. And I had them do a segment where they like show off the different ways that Destiny had changed over the last couple of years because I hadn't been in and I didn't know. They were honestly amazing. Like I didn't prep them for it. I was actually like 45 minutes behind because of technical glitches, but they made that part of the stream so much more than I could have alone. But part of that came from me saying, hey, this is something you're interested in. How can I highlight that and give you an opportunity for that? Also, again, be consistent. And I'm really yelling it because I don't do it. And so this is a do as I say, not as I do. Um, Honestly, when the most success in our fundraising campaign came from when I was Facebook posting and tweeting every day saying, hey, if you haven't donated, you should donate. Hey, if you donated, you should donate a little more because people are not so much worried about you spamming as much as they just want to help you be successful. Also, treat people like people. That is basically the big meaning of this entire thing. Seriously, just treat people like people. Use that as your guiding platform, whether you're on social media, whether you're talking to people about your game. Understand that they have interests and personal concerns. And odds are, if they care about your game, it's because they want to see it be successful. Um, just treat them like people, and you'll probably get some good returns. So go forth and rock. If you need any of my contact information, it is listed here at the end of this slide. Also, if you need help, let me help. I do professional writing, I do marketing, game consulting. I want to help. But otherwise, if you have any follow-up questions or anything, in addition to what you can ask here, feel free to reach out to me on social media or via email. I'd love to talk to you. And this isn't that giant full inbox, so it's much more likely I'll see it.
Yeah.
That's it.
When you think of services like Promoter App or Do Distribute, you mentioned putting a key like right into the email or something. Do you feel like that extra step to go to like a place where you have to click through a couple more times? Do you think that would hinder somebody to actually like go through and just grab the game if it was something like a platform like that?
A platform to sure. So if you're using sort of a platform to distribute keys like Do Distribute or Evolve is a PR company that uses something called Terminal that they use. To me, those extra couple steps might be frustrating the first couple times around. The benefit with like Evolve Terminal is that establishes a platform so that I know exactly where to get the information that I want on a consistent basis. And so similarly, Do Distribute, I think is helpful. I would recommend that if you're a smaller group and you're working purely independently, embedding it in the email with the understanding that you are going to provide the follow-up, I think that would be the most direct and probably the most efficient way. But if you're working with a PR company that you know has a pretty large reach, I actually personally prefer having those systems. In the back.
What would you suggest would be a good method if you're following up with people? So you sent your nice thing, they're like, cool, I'll get back to you. Time happens. What would you suggest? Like, here's the stuff I'm working on, or how's your thing? Like, what would be the good little poke?
Sure. So if you have already sent your initial message and you're trying to figure out how do you do your follow-up, what's the most efficient follow-up? Part of that is going to come from figuring out who you've individually sent that message to. If you're doing just sort of a general follow-up, I think it's really useful to just say, hey, one key tip, use a reply all to the message that you sent so that if I only saw your second message and not your first one, it's out of context. So you want to make sure that you have that entire thread that I can read, and you can say, hey, I messaged you last week talking about the game that I launched. I just wanted to see if you got a chance to play the game and what your thoughts were. A lot of time as a journalist, there's this idea that like if somebody's following up with me, they want to know if I already posted coverage. and I may have just played it and like not written anything about it yet. But if you say like, hey, I'm really just looking for feedback or information or want to know if you've played it, that can start to open that dialogue so that maybe a week or a couple weeks down the line you have that article you're looking for. Otherwise, sometimes just pinging somebody on Twitter and at mention, hey, I dropped you an email. It'd be awesome if let me know if you saw it, if you can take a look, because some people pay more attention to Twitter than email.
What stage would you recommend developers get in contact with someone like yourself? Like, would it only be after a demo is available, or is Kickstarter with videos acceptable? What stage?
Sure. So, when should you start to reach out to somebody involved in the press? Should you, if you have a video already, if you have actual playable content? For me, I'm much more likely to pay attention to it if there's some sort of playable content. It doesn't have to be early access, but having a demo of some kind, because there's an old, I think it's a Jay Leno sketch that talks about how you can turn a trailer for anything into something really exciting. And so if you have it was like Harry Potter and the trip to the Harry Potter Wizarding World bathroom or something. I don't know. The point of the story is that I can get a much more accurate sense of what there is to offer in your game if I can get hands on it myself. If you are just looking for feedback on like, does this look good? Is this interesting? Send that out to a targeted group that can give you that feedback. But I think that your time is more efficiently spent when you have that playable content. And as far as Kickstarter is concerned, there was a demo for System Shock. When System Shock demo dropped with the Kickstarter, that was one of the most compelling for me because I knew what I was getting myself into.
So this is kind of a broad question, but what's the process like for developing an online personality for your like brand or like
Big question.
public
Um,
how does one like even begin to work that out or like think about that as a writer or
yeah. How do you develop a persona? How do you establish a brand? This is a kind of nuanced question, and I think part of it has to do with really understanding what you are comfortable conveying to the internet on a consistent basis. One of the nice things about the internet being so broad right now is that you can pretty much be who you want to be and get a following, sometimes to the detriment of people at large, because the internet's full of trolls. But what I would figure out then is like, what is it that you really enjoy sharing with the world? For me, my personal Twitter account is kind of a mix of um, kind of personal anecdotal stories, which some of which are not particularly uplifting, but also, I mean, I do a lot of statements that are not directly political, but are my opinions mixed up with these are really cool things in games. And there are some folks who appreciate that, and there are some folks who don't, and that's okay. For you, if you just like sharing like cat GIFs, I'm not going to take a side on it right now. If you like sharing cat images, you'll find a following. It's about doing what you are really passionate about so that you can do it on a consistent basis and kind of unlock that part of yourself that you want to share with people. I know that's kind of it seems like kind of copping out, but I really have found that that was the way that I was able to establish the most personality, was for me to find out that like I'm an English major. I kind of like using big-ish words sometimes, and though I become uncomfortable with that sometimes, what I had to realize was I just need to get settled into that. And there are some folks who appreciate that style of discourse, and there are some who don't. And that's how it works.
Time for one more.
One last one.
Do you have any tips for people who don't enjoy social media and can't be consistent on it?
So if you cannot be consistent on social media or don't enjoy it, what do you do? I honestly, and this sounds ridiculous, find somebody else who does. Unfortunately, algorithmically speaking, and this is from anecdotal experience. This is my experience, not a deep undercover study of Facebook or Twitter. The more consistently you post, the more likely it is that people in your network will see what you're talking about. So if you post infrequently, if you post once a month, something like that, it's not just that you're throwing it into this giant mass of stuff, but you're throwing it into this giant mass of stuff, and the algorithms don't know that your stuff is important. So even if it's going to be like these are incremental updates or screenshots or whatever, having something consistent is really helpful. And another thing that I think some people who are not a big fan of being on social media frequently do is just build up a big schedule. Like, just feel, all right, I'm going to deal with this for 2 hours and put together a bunch of tweets that are going to post over the next 2 weeks. And then I'm not going to come back except if I get an app mention or something that I have to respond to. But also understand, you don't have to do social media. There are people out there who are successful by focusing on their craft and then shipping, and then having whatever comes up as a result. Just understand that doing social media increases the odds, but it's not the work. You still have to have a good product. Thanks a lot, everybody.